Today. My name is Jessica Schklar, and I am, as you can see, an executive director at MBA Mission, which is the oldest and probably highest ranked um, admissions consulting firm. I'll talk a little more about us later, but my main goal is to get to your questions. Because you'll be listening to me talk and answer your questions for a little bit, I want to make sure I give you a little bit of my background. I went to Harvard for college, and then I worked in admissions for a small university in LA that I guarantee none of you have heard of. Because no one has heard of it, my job was not about admissions as much as getting out there and talking to applicants and trying to encourage them to apply. So I created workshops and I traveled around the country and I taught people how to write application essays. And I taught people how to think about their values when picking a school. And through that process, I decided I should go to business school. So I applied to 5 schools. I applied to Harvard, Stanford, Kellogg, Yale, and UCLA. And I got into all 5, which is not a flex. I'm just telling you that I've been there. I know how to write application essays. It's a subject I love. So I went to Harvard for business school, as I had for college, and then worked in the corporate world for a while. Always did volunteer work with college and business school applications for friends through the New York City Public Schools. And then eventually I got laid off from JP Morgan and discovered MBA Mission. And so I have now been here. This is my 16th year full time. I have spoken with thousands of applicants. I am sure some of you have done consultations with me or my wonderful colleagues. I have worked with hundreds of applicants, reviewed thousands of essay drafts, and I really love business school application essays because it's your chance to tell your story. And I think I'm going to go through some tips and points, but I think one thing I really want you to take away is that it's your story. There is no right answer. There isn't a magic formula that's going to get you in, and you don't need to sound a certain way. You need to be sincere and authentic, and which is such an overused word. I realize that. But it's not about being the fanciest or the best writer. It's about really talking about who you are and what is important to you. So I pulled a few slides on some essay writing tips. This is part of a larger presentation we give where we go in depth in career stories and brainstorming, but I wanted to make sure I left a lot of time for your questions. So we're going to go through these slides, and you should certainly feel free to post questions. And once I get through the material, I'll be happy to answer as many as I can. So one key thing to realize is that these essays are narratives, not essays. What's the difference? So a narrative is more personal. When you think of an essay, it's something that you do for school. We were taught 5 paragraphs, give an introduction, give 3 supporting statements in each paragraph, and then give a conclusion. It's not like that. I think of them as narratives, or really the word I prefer is memoirs. These are stories about your life. You see the word stories on there. These are stories about your life and experience, and they're subtle. They don't just hit you over the head with, I did this, I did this, I did this. They let the reader draw their conclusions. Now, you might be panicking and saying, I'm not a great writer. It's too fancy for me. We'll get you through that. Let me talk about that too. So I'm going to give you some examples. Here's a career essay. This is not real, by the way. During my first 3 years at Goldman Sachs, I worked harder than other analysts. I quickly proved my analytical skills and dedication. So I was asked to mentor junior analysts and was then placed on some of the biggest projects in the company's history. I helped close the $500 billion purchase of MBA Inc. by Mission Inc. and led 3 analysts on the $600 billion purchase of Manhattan Inc. by GMAT Inc. I found myself gaining the respect and attention of analysts, associates, and even managing directors. Further, I had worked on international deals, which carried cachet internally. It was extremely gratifying when my mentor, our managing director, Steve Smith, promoted me to associate 1 year ahead of schedule, validating my tireless efforts and leadership skills. So usually I pause here and ask you to tell me what you think of this, but I want to make sure that I get to your questions. I see them popping up. So let me tell you, this is not a good essay. Most people, when they read this, would think, I don't like this guy. It's all about him. It's I did this, I did this, I did this. There's no subtlety. There's no humility. This is just someone saying how great he is. Do you want to be classmates with this guy? That's a good test for yourself. So let me rewrite this for you in a way that I hope shows you how you can do the same tell the same information, but in a much more appealing way. On my first day at Goldman Sachs, my managing director, Steve Smith, informed me I don't have an open door policy. I have a no door policy. So I would frequently walk into his office, often at 3 or 4 a.m., with a question, only to be encouraged to ask even more. After 6 months, I barely visited Steve, but soon found junior analysts at my door saying, Steve said that you were the right person to ask. Then Steve personally requested that I join the deal team at the purchase of MBA Inc. by Mission Inc. and asked that I lead a team of 3 analysts on the purchase of Manhattan Inc. by GMAT Inc. After a grueling 6 months of meetings with the CFO in Argentina and the CFO in Mexico, both deals closed on the same day, and Steve championed my early promotion. This says the same thing. This shows that he worked hard, but instead of saying, I worked hard, he said, I'd be in the office at 3 or 4 asking questions. There's a lot more humility to this essay because he's showing I didn't know anything. I asked a lot of questions. The previous one said, I worked tirelessly. This one shows that he was working. This one shows the international experience. There's so much more likability, humility. And yet it's not sophisticated or complicated writing. It just is much more of a personal journey as opposed to hitting you over the head with how great this guy is. Okay? Let me give you another example. Okay. I grew up in a successful family and took nothing for granted. Many judged me as spoiled, but few knew that I was working incredibly hard from an early age. My parents had no toleration for me being idle. My days were filled with chores, and I worked odd jobs in high school. Hard work became core to who I am and continues to shape me to this day. This is also very generic. Where did this guy work? What makes this essay come to life? We don't really get any sense of who this person is. He's just throwing us a bunch of kind of random cliched statements. I worked hard. I couldn't be idle. My days were filled with chores. There's nothing to hold on to identify who this person really is. So here's a different version. It's easy to make assumptions about Junior when Senior is so successful, but my father used every ounce of the determination that enabled him to build his firm to ensure that none of his kids were spoiled. For me, that didn't just mean I was expected to get good grades and compete hard in high school sports. It meant that I pumped gas for 20 hours a week, starting in ninth grade, to pay for school trips and to walk around with pocket cash. I learned early that I could take nothing for granted. Again, I hope you see this guy's more likable. He's got more spark, more energy. We see that his father worked really hard, wasn't given everything. It gives us a little bit more awareness of the background. And we know that he pumped gas. He wasn't working at his dad's finance intern firm. This guy was really working hard and he had to pay for himself. There's a whole work ethic here that comes through that didn't in the first one, which was just a lot of tell and not show. Okay? So just a quick recap of a narrative versus an essay. First person perspective, use I, but don't start every sentence with I. Humility, show growth. Schools like growth. You're not expected to be perfect from day one. Simplicity. None of this writing was complex. There were very few words that every single one of you, no matter your English background, didn't know. And then it's showing, don't telling. I did this. I worked hard is telling. I would ask questions starting at 3 or 4 in the morning is showing. Okay? I want to talk for a minute about opening lines. Find your voice, personal narrative. All right, grab and hold their attention. I have some opening lines. And again, there's not really a right answer, although in one of these cases there is. And the attention here is just, you want to get your reader interested. The admissions reader is reading thousands and thousands and thousands of essays. You want them to remember you. You want them to be interested in reading more. So here are some famous lines. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. Call me Ishmael. It was a dark and stormy night. Those of you who grew up here and studied basic English, you might know the first two, but no one really ever knows who wrote It Was a Dark and Stormy Night, except, okay, Peanuts, and Woodstock. We're not going to say that from the comic strip. But this can be a really powerful line, even though you don't have to be a famous author to have said it. Okay? So there are 4 different options here. You can take a straightforward approach with your essay, which would sound like, after 5 months of hard work, my startup gelato concept shut down and I lost my life savings. Or you could go for a launch right into the story. When I left McKinsey to start Fresh-tastic Gelato, my mentor questioned my sanity. My mother literally cried. Before I'd even handed in my security tag, I was elbow deep, presumably in gelato. Or you could start with an anecdote. Elbow deep in gelato. I washed my hands and lunged for the phone. And finally, we have the inverted. This is, I would also think of this as more as visual. 1 quart tubs lined the refrigerated shelves. As the sun blazed, customers lined up for 2 city blocks. But still, the bankers were lining up as well. I love that because it's so visual. You see the ice cream tubs, you see the customers, you're saying he was successful. And yet there were creditor problems. I said not all of these were equally successful. There's no right or wrong in that. Your admissions is not going to say, oh, he used this kind of opening, you can't accept him. But look at the first one, straightforward. This opening line gives away the whole story. I know how the story ends now. I lost my life savings. My gelato concept shut down. I don't need to read the rest of the story. Your goal is to hook your reader so they don't know from the beginning where it ends. So after you write your opening line, ask yourself, did I just give the ending? Right? That's often how we were trained to write in school. Summarize everything from the beginning and then give the detail. We're not doing that here. You want them to read. So any of the other 3 are great. They all grab attention and keep people going. First one, I already know what's happening. I don't want to read anymore. Okay. You can use conflict, but it does not have to be violent. But it can just be any oppositional forces, like this one. You've got the customers lined up and the creditors. You've got the McKinsey manager questioning his sanity and his mother crying. You've got conflict here that engages the reader. Okay, and last examples, and then I'm going to turn to your questions. Keep it simple. What does simple sound like? This is not simple. I was brimming with excitement. After years of hard, almost unrelenting work and effort, I was finally about to achieve the pinnacle of my career, a presentation in front of our CEO, an impressive man with an unrivaled pedigree, and someone for whom I held a tremendous amount of esteem. I could barely contain my excitement as I started to present, my palms sweating and my heart racing. And then, to my absolute horror, there on page 1, a typo in the CEO's name. It was the most horrifying, embarrassing moment of what heretofore had been a glowing career. I promise you, I have tried to read that straight for years. I can't. Every time I read it, I get caught up in the drama. It's too over the top. How many adjectives and adverbs are there in there? It was horrifying, embarrassing. The guy was impressive. He had tremendous esteem. He had a great pedigree. My palms were sweating. It's just over the top. I don't even like this guy anymore. And I made him up. I wrote this and I made this guy up and I don't like him. And I kind of want him to fail because he's just over the top. Here's a much shorter, much simpler, and much more devastating description of the same thing on the second bullet. There it was in bold type on slide 1. Presentation to CEO Peter Monroe. I had prepared for months, and yet at perhaps the biggest moment of my career, I made what can only be described as a rookie mistake. Our CEO's last name is Monroe. That's devastating. This guy is humble. He isn't saying it was embarrassing. He was like, this was the mistake. I couldn't believe it. It's a rookie mistake. I feel for this guy. Again, he's fictional. I made him up. But now I feel for him. I feel so badly for him standing up with that typo. And you can see it's so much shorter, which in word count is a really big deal. And yet it's much more powerful. So a couple of specific things. Watch out for industry-specific jargon. I pulled all these examples from actual first drafts. Promise you, no final drafts were pulled from this. But I rationalized the internal application portfolio for. I led the basic design concepts for digital hardware design, such as DC loading analysis, AC timing analysis, and whatever else this says. Okay. Your reader is a generalist. They do not have a technical background. If you come from finance, from engineering, from consulting, just be simple. Use the grandmother test. You want your grandmother, okay, maybe your mother, to understand it. Okay, overwrought. You saw a good example of that already. But as I gazed at the New York skyline, which represents the hopes and dreams of so many who had come before, I was filled with inspiration that I too, like them, would one day reach the pinnacle of the financial industry. Again, that's just over the top. You know, there's nothing here I would save. I wanted to go into finance. Like, there's just nothing here that's worth it to me. Okay, here are more words. I see this all the time. I was engaged in the pursuit of passing my CFA exam. How about I was studying for the CFA? My goal entails providing counsel to key players in the technology space. I want to be a technology consultant. Right? And finally, especially on resumes where you just don't have a lot of space, don't use synonyms. Just I coached, guided, and mentored. Yeah, they're all slightly different. Pick one. It's really okay. You just have to pick one. Okay, I'm about to get to your questions, but let me quickly tell you about us. We are the #1 firm by Poets and Quants. We're the highest rated firm on GMAT Club. We are the only admissions firm recommended by Manhattan Prep. We are one of the only firms with full-time consultants. Also, all of our consultants have MBAs and are writers, and that's crucial because we don't want to just look at a final product like the admissions offices do and tell you if it's good or not. We want to help you get there, take random ideas and turn them into something amazing. We have unbelievable collaboration. We hire very, very few consultants here, and we do lots and lots of free events. I want to give you a discount code and tell you about On Track because this is really exciting. This is not here. There it is. Let me go back one. See if it shows up. No. Okay. On Track is a series of online videos. I think we're up to almost 500, where 5-minute videos on every aspect of business school admissions you could imagine. We have I think I wrote the resume sections. We have sample resumes on there. We have how do you write a resume bullet point? What do you do for margins? What font? We have what do you do if you're a family business? From family business, what if you do if you're consulting? How about a private equity resume? We have models and templates. We have maybe 10, 15 essay videos on every single school of the top 20 or 30. There's brainstorming, there's practice interview questions. There is so much incredible value on here. It's really just an unbelievable resource for you. And you have 40% off. There's a code there, Spotlight 40 off. You can get a 3-month, 6-month, or 1-year subscription, depending on when you're applying. And then once you log on, you can create a profile which lists the schools you're going to so you don't get overwhelmed with all 500 videos, but you still have access to all of them in the library. So it'll create a custom path for you to work yourself through based on where you are. If you've taken the GMAT, if you haven't taken it, like if you've chosen your schools, and then it'll give you certain videos to watch. But you'll also have a whole library of all the other ones. So I'm going to leave this Spotlight 40 off. Okay. And then here are some QR codes. I can go back and forth between these two. This is for a free consultation, and this is for On Track. Apologize if my eyeglasses start to glare, but I do want to be able to answer your questions. So I'm just refreshing votes. Okay. Do qualitative factors such as emotional quotient and order skills provide strong case for admit to HBS and similar schools versus quantitative factors such as scores, GPA, essay prompts, and work experience? I think it's a great question, and I would say there's no metric breakdown. I view it this way. The quantitative measures are the price of entry. You have to have reasonable entry scores, which is by which I mean GMAT, test scores, GPA, so they know you can do the work. But that only gets you in the door, like to be considered as a reasonable applicant. After that, it's the qualitative skills that will differentiate you. So I think of maybe the metrics as thinking about your are you qualified, and then the qualitative measures as showing how do we select you to create the class. So you have to have both. They're not going to accept. I remember working with someone years and years ago who was a professional athlete and who had been like the star of every team and he had been on and had unbelievable leadership skills, and he'd started a leadership academy, and he kept saying my leadership skills are going to make up for my bad grades and scores. And I said to him, well, if you were taking someone in your sport who was basketball couldn't dribble, it doesn't matter what kind of leader he is. So at that point, a 440 GMAT wasn't going to do it. So they're both important, and you're not going to get into school without both, but there's no actual breakdown of how you indicate how important each one is. Okay. I give long answers. I'm sorry. Okay. Can I use abbreviations in an essay? Yes, but not too much. It has to be readable. So use an abbreviation. If you're talking about mergers and acquisitions, you can say M&A. If for some reason, I don't know why you would, you're talking about calculating an ROI, yeah, you can say ROI. If you're talking about the name of a club for the school, yes. But beyond a very common abbreviation, I'd be very careful. Can you say co or inc instead of company? Yeah, but it's just, I would say use the most common ones. It shouldn't be difficult to read. You want to read it out loud and then make sure that it's not awkward to read, and also then that it's understandable. When it comes to the short answers, every application you have all these like pages and pages of tiny short answers. Describe your job, what's your biggest accomplishment, things like that. There's very tight character space, and if you have to abbreviate words a little more aggressively in there, you can do that. You still want it to be readable, but I definitely will abbreviate more on those ones. Can you please provide a logical breakdown of attempting any essay? I'm going to take a guess at what this means. I don't know that I'm going to get it right because I'm not really sure what the question is, but my guess is sort of how do you approach an essay? I would say you don't, because you should approach an application. Every application will have multiple essays. Sometimes they're hidden in the application itself. Sometimes they're called out separately as essays. You need to approach the application as a whole so that you write out for yourself what are all of the essays that you need to answer for that school. Then say, what are all the possible topics I could put under each one? And then you're mixing and matching, because you don't want to have all your stories take place at work. You don't want to have two stories about overcoming a lack of confidence. You want to make sure every essay keeps them learning more and more about you. So the first step is look at all of the essays and then pull your topics so that they're always learning more about you. The other thing I would say is underline the question so that you break out what the different components are of the questions. Harvard this year, for each of its 3 questions, they each have 2 or 3 different sections. You want to make sure I have my clients highlight those on their essays for me so that we can go back and see, did I answer each of these sections? Okay. How do I choose our accomplished based on the relevance for the university? Again, I'm taking a little bit of a guess as to what you are asking, but choosing your accomplishments for your resume is you want to have the biggest ones with the most measurable impact. When it comes to accomplishments for the story, for your career story, then you want the ones that are the most fundamental preparation for your future career roles. So essentially, there's this tension where applicants come in and most of you want to be career changers. But recruiters are also coming to the school. And what are recruiters looking for? They want to hire people who've been doing that job all along. And that's a tension because job change, same job. And so you handle that by being able to demonstrate in the career essay that you have skills and instincts that you will bring to that new job, even if something about it is different, even if you're changing careers. So in that case, for the career essay, you would pick the accomplishments that most demonstrate fit with the job that you're talking about in the career essay. And then the final way I'll answer it is when it comes to essays about biggest accomplishment or things like that, look at the other essays for the school. What have you not shown them about yourself? Maybe you've shown that you're an individual contributor. So now pick an accomplishment where you can show that you're a team player. Maybe you've shown that you have a great deal of initiative. So another essay talk about problem solving. But you also want to pick your biggest ones. So it's kind of like a grid. You look at all the different factors. All right. How do I answer the prompts in a strategic way and give a story without going a word count? Sometimes it almost seems like we have to list to answer the questions, but that won't make a good essay. Yes, that is excellent as a question, and it is an absolute problem. I want you first to think about, why are schools giving you a word count? It's not just to save them work. There's a very strategic reason underlying it, which is when you're in a class, let's say HBS, where everything is class discussion, you need to be able to make your point succinctly, quickly, and move on. Think about when you're in a company. You run into the CEO in the elevator. You have 30 seconds to sell him on how great you are. You're going to give a pitch to an investor meeting. You don't have an hour to introduce the first slide. So what they're looking for with the essays is the skill of prioritizing, of understanding exactly what you need to say, and then saying it as concisely and tightly as possible. So that's the background. Now, tactical steps. Many, many, many drafts. You can use contractions. You don't have to say, I will, you can say I'll. You don't have to say I did, you can say I. Make things plural instead of singular. You don't have to say, I want to start, I admire a business that. You can say, I admire businesses that. Um, you want to write out your ideas, write the essay, and then just go through, is every word necessary? I often throw away entire first sentences when I get a draft because it's just a way to get them started. They don't really, they're giving away the whole story or something. Um, read the essay out loud. If you stumble over words, if you feel like there's a run on sentence, you can tighten that up. The other thing I would say is take a look at the applications. So again, I'll use HBS because it's a really good example of this. HBS has Harvard Business School has 3 essays, 300 words, 250, and 250. But they also have in the application itself, under the work section, a 250 character question on what's the most significant accomplishment, and another one on what's the biggest challenge you overcame. I sometimes have my clients write those answers in conjunction with the essay because they feel better that they had to cut something out of the essay, but they know they can still fit it in the application. Also remember that your admissions readers are not looking only at your essays. They also will look at your resume and your recommendations and the application. There are lots of opportunities to teach them more about you. If you simply copy and paste your resume into the application, you're missing it out. If you only write about the first bullet point on the resume, you're not telling them more about yourself. So there's no easy answer. This is why I have a job, but that's the best strategy I can give you is those tips. Okay. All right. Moving on. Is it okay to brainstorm with AI for your essay? Oh, interesting question. I will admit that I do not use AI as extensively as I would like, partially because I'm old, but partially because we're so against it from an essay writing perspective that I don't even want to like start going down that path myself. And we can always tell when people have used AI. So absolutely, I would not, think about AI for your essays because the admissions office will know. For brainstorming, I think that would be a really interesting exercise to just, I don't know, load up your resume or load up a brainstorming document you've done and then load up the questions and say, which anecdotes do you think would be most compelling? But I would say it's a crutch to help you brainstorm. It's not a substitute for you then looking at that and saying, yeah, I agree, yeah, I don't agree. I think it just helps. It's kind of like in words with friends when you pick like show me a possible word. It's not you can have to fixate on that word. It just shows you things you might not have thought of before. Okay, so I would say it's used cautiously, but that's an interesting possible use of it. All right, with the goal essay, what should I cover? Transfer skills, what I want to do, what the school will offer. So to some degree, it depends on the question, right? Harvard does not ask why you want to go to the school in their career essay, whereas Wharton asks about it in both essays. So if the school does not ask for it, you do not need to mention it. But a traditional career essay will have 4 components: short-term goals, long-term goals, the background that you've had that gets you to today, and the gap from where you are today to where you want to be when you graduate. That's where the school comes in. And you want to make that gap ambitious, meaning you need the MBA to get you there to the short-term goal, but also attainable. As I said earlier, you want to show the admissions officer, proxy as the recruiter, that you will add value. So you do want to demonstrate your background and your strengths, and then what your goals are, and also how the school will help you get there. Does not need to be in that order, but those are the key elements. Can we get this PowerPoint? I do not know. I'm going to ask GMAT Club to weigh in on that. But worst case, just write to info@mbamission.com and we'll get it to you. Okay. With conflicts, how does engaging in a protest for a good cause in the community come across to AdComs? Does it come across as violent or is it better to word it as community advocacy? That's a great question and a very hot button one right now. I think that politics and religion do not need to be kept out of essays, and your opinions do not need to be kept out of essays, but you need to proceed with extreme caution. If you are sharing what your values are and what's important to you, that's okay. If you're telling the admissions office how they are supposed to feel or what right and wrong is, then that's not okay. Um, I often have clients who are very religious, but not my religion, and my colleagues as well, they'll run essays by me because if I come from a pretty strict religious background myself, and if I feel uncomfortable reading it, like I'm trying to be converted, they've gone too far. But if I read it and I understand who they are and what their values are, I have no problem with that. I think if it's violent protest, you want to tone down on your role. You don't want to lie. But if you were out there spraying people with pepper spray and tasing people, I probably wouldn't mention that. So I think it's just one of those things that proceed with caution. That's a good place to have a professional or a couple of people outside of your circle, but preferably who know admissions, read it just to say, does this make me uncomfortable? And I would say there are a lot of hot button issues out there right now that I would stay away from. The essay asked about your preparation for the program. What can I share here? Work experience, networking. So again, it kind of depends on the specific question and how it's phrased. But if you're going into a very technical field, you want to show that you have, like a technical MBA, like a MBA tech one, those one-year techs. You want to show that you have that tech background. If you want to talk about, if you come from an English or literature arts or liberal arts background, but you're going to an MBA, show that you've done the finance preparation, that you've taken CFA, you've taken HBS core. A lot of that will be on your resume, so you don't necessarily have to talk about all that in the essay. That's more factual, but I would more understand in the essay, I might talk about more what you learned from it, how that prepared you. And then in terms of talking about people you've spoken to, yes, you want to demonstrate to the school that you understand its culture, that you understand how the school works. You're not trying to prove knowledge and tell them what they already know. You're really trying to relate that to you. For example, I read a great essay that said, the minute I walked into Duke's Hall of Flags and saw the LGBT flag hanging there, I felt a tremendous sense of pride. It was the first time I felt like I had been recognized. And that's when I could see how supportive Duke was to people from all backgrounds. Okay? That's a very compelling way to write that essay. Saying, I really like that Duke has a Hall of Flags because it shows that they really care about their students. That's just telling them, right? So you want to try to relate that to yourself. Okay, advice for the goal-focused essay. Prompts if I'm not really sure. Do I just need to pick something, or should I spin it that I'm interested in multiple aspects and want the MBA program to guide me? Sophia, that's an outstanding question. I have 6 different sentences in my head right now. Sorry. MBA programs do not expect that you are going to do what you said you were going to do in the application essay. They're not going to lock you in. When you walk across the graduation stage, they're not going to whip back the diploma and say, no, 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 you're not doing what you said you were going to do in your application essay. They're certainly not calling you in 10 years and say, give it back, you haven't met your long-term goals. So they're asking not because they're trying to force you or lock you in, but they're asking because, again, like with the essay length, trying to prepare you for the MBA experience, they're trying to prepare you for the MBA experience, which is so intense and so like drinking from a fire hose that if you haven't put serious thought into what you want to do and what your strengths are, it's overwhelming. Recruiting often starts. I mean, I had a client at Columbia who called me after her first week. She's like, well, we've already been working on our resume and developing videoed elevator pitches for our interviews. It's a good thing you told me you helped me work through what I wanted to do. That was week 1. Harvard, we did a study once on how soon recruiting starts. It was week 4. So there's a big difference between saying, I don't know what I want to do, but I hope the MBA will help me figure it out, and saying, I'm really interested in this space, and I think, and I'm most interested in going into this direction. However, I would also be looking at a different option. I guess if you want to have kind of different options, I would do one of 2 things. Either have a very clear career goal, long-term goal. I know that eventually I want to own my own company in this space, but I can see 2 paths for getting there. Either I'll pursue consulting in this space, or I'll join a startup and hope to grow with the company. Right? Or this is something all my military clients do. You start with a very clear short-term goal. Immediately post MBA, I want to join consulting because I've only ever worked in the military and I don't understand, I haven't had experience in the private sector. I'll bring my leadership skills, blah, blah, blah. I could see that taking me in one of two directions. Okay. So either do the one-on-one path or 2-to-1 or 1-to-2. But either way, you want to have some kind of controlled message other than, I don't know what I want to do. Because again, admissions is looking at to see what recruiters are going to be excited by you. What recruiters are going to be happy that you are a student there. Because admissions officers want those recruiters to be excited by the students. So they come back and they add more spots and they interview more people. So you have to show the admissions readers something more definite. Okay. When writing essays, I'm having a bit of difficulty on balancing the personal element in the professional style. Sorry, does the personal element need to be strictly aligned to the professional side? We like personality and personal stories to come through, but that doesn't mean that in the career essay, you have to talk about childhood trauma, right? Unless you're going into a job where advocating against childhood trauma is a big deal. And I have seen that. But if you're talking about going from investment banking into private equity and you're currently in investment banking, and maybe the most you could say is, I want to go into private equity in tech because I've always been fascinated by technology as early as when I started to take apart, and build my family's first computer. Like, that's about it. I mean, and you don't even have to say that. If it doesn't have a relation to your personal background, you don't need to. How your experience at work is your personal story. Your success with a project is your personal story. So on a professional essay, it's fine to keep it professional about you, right? Your professional experience at work, unless the personal is so relevant to the goals that you're trying to move into. More personal essays, obviously, you want those to be more personal. Please give a sample structure or format an essay should follow. I don't think I can because there are so many different prompts. I gave you 4 possible opening lines, 3 of which were good. A career essay can start with the goal. It can start with the problem you want to solve. It can start with the moment when you realized that this is what you wanted to do. I randomly, off the top of my head, I worked on essays today that one started with a motto for a school. Another one started with a breakdown of 3 different types of certain kind of executives, and then discussed where she had gone, or had already had experience in them. Another one, well, that wasn't a good one. That started out with a lot of I statements and what I had done. We've scratched that one over. One started out with an anecdote of a crisis moment in his life. So I can't tell you the right format. You want to grab their attention, give the background, and then lead them to a conclusion. For a career essay, if you want a real structured format, I would say background, goals, and how the school is going to help you get there. But that's just a very, very high level. Again, On Track will have lots of sample essays if you wanted to do that. Okay, how many experiences are ideal to talk about in a prompt such as this from HBS? What experiences have shaped who you are, how you invest in others, and what kind of leader you want to become? I'm glad you posted that question because it touches on what I said earlier. That's a 250-word essay, and it has 3 components. Experiences, and yes, plural. What experiences have shaped who you are. 2, how you invest in others. And 3, what kind of leader you want to become. So you have 250 words to cover 3 topics. You're not going to get a lot of experiences in there. 2 probably max, or 1 with different components of it. You just don't have space. So I can't tell you there's an ideal number. Can you get 3 in? Maybe. I've seen essays where 3 experiences are summarized each in 1 sentence, right? On this date, I did this. On this date, or at this company, I did this. At this company, I did this. At this company, these 3 experiences shaped me too, right? So you can't tell in-depth stories. It just depends on what you're trying to get at. But yeah, that's 250 words for 3 parts. It's tough. It's a tight essay. I'm very curious. This is the first year they've had these 3 essays and the first year in 5 years that they've been so strict about word count. And it's a new admissions director. I'm very curious about next year. Do business school committees have preference for younger, less experienced applicants because they're able to cope with longer working hours and less responsibilities? Well, I think recruiters might have that preference, but not really. Business schools want classmates who will enhance the experience of other classmates. So if you come in and you have no experience to contribute, that's not a good model. They also want students who are being desired, is the wrong word, who recruiters want to hire. So are recruiters really looking for someone right out the gate? Maybe investment bankers want younger applicants who they can work to death. Um, but I think it's more about quality of work than quantity. We're generally seeing that in US schools, average work experience is 3 to 5 years. Harvard seems to be creeping up to 4 to 6 years work experience. European schools, 5 to 7. But that's not a mandate. I've had plenty of 30-year-olds get into these top schools. So it's about, and some 25, 26-year-olds too. It depends on the quality of your experience. Um, that's just one factor. What are the best ways to reach out and schedule a one-on-one with MBA Mission? Well, there's a QR code right there for free consultation. You can also go to our website, mbamission.com, and there's a menu at the top right that says free consultation. And you click the drop down, fill out a form, and you can request me, or you can just say first available. They will send you a link to schedule. Super easy. How do top tier US schools define cultural fit for their holistic admissions process in admitting or rejecting the candidate? Really hard thing to define, because if they could define it, they would tell you, and that would be like a series of checkboxes. They're looking, I would start by looking at the school's mission statement. Berkeley has its 4 guiding principles. Stanford, change lives, change organizations, change the world. Look at the essay questions too. It's about niceness. It's about fit with the community. So if you have a school that talks a lot, Kellogg talks about being student-led. So talks about a school that's, if you're applying to a school that talks about being student-driven, that's a collaborative school. Don't pick an essay topic. It's about how you dictated to someone. Pick the stories about being more collaborative. Make sure a couple bullet points on your resume talk about cross-functional teams. Visiting the school is a great way to demonstrate cultural fit because you're able to really see it come to life. That is not reasonable for everyone. And schools understand that if you're in another country or across the country, you can't necessarily visit. So I think it starts with being able to define for yourself what is the cultural fit. I mean, what is the culture of the school? And then looking to understand what's the fit that you bring. So if you look at Haas's guiding principles, and one of them is about student always, and that really resonates with you because you're a lifelong learner, and you've always loved taking certificate classes and learning new things and going to lectures. And well, maybe you choose to write about that because that shows that cultural fit. Schools do not hide who they are, right? They have mission statements. They have essay questions. They have, who are we looking for? They will tell you who they are. And then you just look to see how does that match. You also want to talk to students. You should be reaching out through your network, call the admissions office and ask for an ambassador, or go online to the student clubs and find someone and email them, or use LinkedIn. How does a B School committee determine the quality of paid work experience and pro bono community service? Well, so obviously there's an integrity thing involved. If you put something on your resume about the quality of it, they're going to believe it. But I would say the most important thing is to make sure that on your resume and in your essays, when you talk about the experience, you make it credible and impactful. Don't just give your responsibility. I was editing a resume recently that said, actively engaged in the following organization by helping students. Well, I got on the phone. I'm like, what does that mean, actively engaged? Oh, well, I teach every weekend, and I launched a specific class for this population of students, and it's grown from 10 to 40. So now her resume says, launched weekly program for girls between ages of 8 and 10 to teach basic whatever concepts. Class has grown from 5 to 20, and I'm currently training another teacher to add a new section. You make it credible and they'll believe you. I mean, you're signing an integrity statement anyway, so be specific, be detailed. Make sure your resume is not about your responsibility or your job description. It's about the specific actions that you took and the impact that you had. What can I do to strengthen my profile if I'm currently on a career break and will be without a full-time job for the next few months? So I guess some of it depends on the reason for a career break. If you're just like studying for the GMAT and you're not that interested in working, that's worse than if you are doing a degree or you're recovering from an injury or an illness. So, but I have seen people be very successful with job breaks when they use the time to prepare for their new career. So if you are on a job break and you're not going to be working, see if you can do an internship 20 hours a week, unpaid, whatever, for the job that you want to move into or the kind of company. Now you can write your essay about not, I haven't been doing anything, but I used this time to test whether this is what I really wanted to do. You could up your volunteer work as well. But I don't, we have a really old blog post. It might be going back 10 years. You can probably find it on our blog if you just search the word layoff. But it was called Lay Off Your Worries If You Use the Time Well. And we launched it in 2008 when there was a huge line of layoffs. See, I've been at this company forever. And we were trying to reassure people that if you've been laid off, schools get that, but you have to use the time well. So if you just, you're laid off and you do nothing but watch TV, file your nails, and like go study for the GMAT, that's not using the time well. But if you get training, if you volunteer, if you get something published, if you use the time effectively. Okay, moving on. What time is it? Oh, I got more time. Contribution essay. How do I nail it? Should I promise a bunch of things? So this I think you're talking about, what will be your contribution to the school? Well, the school is realistic. They know you're not going to do every single thing you mentioned, but you want it to be very tied to who you already are, because the point of the contribution essay is not to randomly come up with some wacky idea. It's to teach the admissions committee who you are. So the best example of this is the Wharton Essay 2, 400 words. What will your specific and meaningful contributions be to Wharton? So they're very clear, specific and meaningful. I will be an active member of the consultant club is not specific and meaningful. But given my experience consulting to companies going through intergenerational transfers, I want to put together a workshop for my classmates where I bring in a couple of entrepreneurs from family business who've been through that process, of leverage a law student who could talk about the legal ramifications of intergenerational transfers, and a couple of people with finance backgrounds in transformation, and run a workshop for my classmates on all aspects of family businesses transferring through generations. That's specific and meaningful, right? I've always loved acting and I acted throughout college. I'm going to use my acting skills to run a public speaking skills workshop for my classmates. That's specific and meaningful. So, 2 or 3 things, depends on the length of the essay. I did have a client a couple of years ago interview with Harvard Business School, and they asked him that question. He gave a couple of answers, and then she's like, wait, I'm going to stop you. You're going to be really busy. You can pick one professional and one social. Now answer it. So we had prepared that. So he talked about it. But in an essay, you could probably do a little bit more. But again, the point is to teach them about you and then relate that knowledge of you to the school. Okay, can AI be used for essay editing? I would be very, very careful. A second AI question from you. I'd be very careful about it. AI, we have tested this. We have given AI essay prompts and had them write it and had them edit it and then shared it with other people to see what they thought, because we need to be up on this as well. We could always spot the AI edited essays. They were generic. They didn't have that personal touch. So I would just proceed with extreme caution, because admissions officers are on the lookout for it, and because you sign an integrity statement that you wrote this. So you should do that. If you edit it, I would say edit it and then look and say, do I actually like these edits? Again, it might trigger some ideas for you, but I would not use it as a substitute for actual work. How important is it for applicants to highlight early entrepreneurial experiences, especially if these ventures were in a different field than their current role? I think it depends on your goal. If you want to be an entrepreneur, but in your current field, then you'd like to showcase that you have an entrepreneurial spirit. So I would emphasize that. If it was just some kind of cool thing that you did, I would have it on your resume, but it may not be a topic of an essay. If you're trying to show that you're a risk taker, but now you've decided you want to take risks within an established company, maybe you use it as an example of risk taking, but that showed you that you prefer that safety net. So it really depends on your story. You don't have to force it in. I wouldn't hide it, because I think it is an interesting part of your experience, but maybe it's just mentioned on your resume and not discussed extensively in an essay. It really just depends on how it fits to your story. Thank you, Sophia. You're welcome. Okay, I'm scrolling. Some suggestions to approach this question. How do you anticipate showing resilience during your time as an MBA candidate? Oh, can you type me what school that is? I can't remember that, and I love that question. How do you anticipate showing resilience during your time as an MBA candidate? That's a great question. And it's not what I'm working on this year, so give me a minute to think. Sneak in some water. I would make sure that that essay is grounded in reality. If you just come in and say, I anticipate showing resilience by journaling and working out a lot, and I'm also really going to form a group of classmates who will help me, and I'm going to get up at 5 every morning and review my notes, it's not grounded in anything. That's just all futuristic. I would ground that essay in how you have shown resilience in the past, and then how you will use that in at business school. So if you say, I had to show resilience when I was laid off. I was suddenly at a loss of what to do, and I was completely overwhelmed by having all these options of how to fill my day. And so I used the time to create a structure and a calendar, and I used also really prioritized what will make me feel good at the end of each day. While in business school, it won't be an option of having, you know, an excessive amount of time, but the opposite, it is an option of having an unlimited number of activities. And so I'll use the same approach of applying a value ranking to all the things I want to do, and then determining how I want to make sure I close every day in making sure I, overcame the challenge. Whatever, I just made that up. So, but that's what I would make sure it's grounded in your past. Just as if they say, what's your future career? You have to ground it in your past, because otherwise there's no context for it. Okay? But please type and tell me what that score is. I love that question.
Hi,
Um,
Jessica.
yeah.
Sorry to interject, but a very super engaging discussion. But we are over time, so we should wrap up in the
Oh, I
next.
thought we were going till 7. I'm so sorry. Can I answer one more?
Oh, sure. Yes. Yeah. We can wrap up in.
Okay, this is the last one.
Yes.
Okay. For the HBS essays on leadership and curiosity, I'm curious. I'm torn on whether I should focus on anecdotes about my personal or professional life. Also, is talking about childhood experiences rather than more recent experiences, less impactful. So remember that the essays are a whole along with everything else. So your career essay talks about professional. Your recommenders will talk about your professional experience. Your resume is largely professional. So if you have really good answers that are personal for the other two, I would say go for it. But you want to really think about whether they are the best stories. The other thing, and remember, one of them is about experiences plural. So maybe there's one personal and one professional there. In terms of childhood, I would say childhood could be a turning point, but should not be the beginning, should not be the end of the essay. You don't want to have this epiphany when you were 10 years old and then not do anything with it. But one of my all-time favorite essays actually came about because a client wrote about something that happened when she was 10 years old. But then we brought it current. We actually opened the essay with her 24th birthday party. And then she reflected back on how that birthday party came about because of this experience when she was 10. So we brought the essay much more current. So it's fine. Those were big experiences, but don't stop there. Okay. I got through all the questions. Oh, wait, no, I didn't. New questions added. Oh, Foster. Okay, thank you. That was all. Okay, excellent. I hope to see you at consultations. I hope to see you at future presentations. I hope this was helpful. Thanks, everyone.